and welcome back to another Crafternoon. My name is Tara and I work for the Ottawa Public Library. Today I'm really excited to be here to share another amazing art project with you. Are you ready? Let's get started. Activate your creative mind, warm up your fingers, and if you think you might need some help with some of the steps of this project, don't be shy to ask an adult. Today we are going to take a look at the wilds of Africa to create our very own sunset on the savanna. Stick around for a list of items you're going to need to complete this beautiful sunset scene. To create your very own spectacular African sunset on the savanna, you are going to need a sheet of white paper. Now, because we're going to be using paints today, if you have a thicker type of paper, that might work a little bit better. So something like cardstock, watercolor paper, or even Bristol board would work well. If you're using Bristol board, make sure you don't use the shiny side. Use the side that's less shiny because it will absorb the paint much better. If you don't have any of these thicker types of papers at home, that is okay. You can always use a regular sheet of printer paper. You will also need a pencil, an eraser, a pencil sharpener, a dark colored marker like black or brown or even a dark purple would work well. Because we're using paints, we'll also need either a paintbrush or you can cut a little piece of sponge, and that works really well as well. You'll need a jug of water and some watercolor paints. Or if you don't have any watercolor paints, stick around because I'm going to explain how you can make some paints with the help of a grown-up using things that you have at home. You may also want to have some paper towel on hand. And because we may be diluting some of the paints to make them a little bit lighter, you may also want to have some mixing trays. So plastic lids or styrofoam trays work really well for that purpose. For the very end, we may want to frame our artwork because you've put so much time and effort into it. So you'll need a glue stick and a sheet of colored construction paper. I mentioned earlier that if you don't happen to have any watercolor paints at your home, you can ask a grown-up to help you make some paints using things that you have at home. The reason you'll need to ask a grown-up is because we'll be using teas and coffees to create your paints. And to make tea and coffee, you normally need to use boiling water. So this one over here is coffee. This is mandarin orange spice herbal tea. This is a green tea, which has created kind of a golden yellow color. This is regular orange pekoe tea. And this is a raspberry tea that has created a really nice ruby red color. So you can create some really nice sunset colors using teas and coffees at home. But please ask a grown-up to help you make your little paints and let them cool down before you start to use them. For step one of our African sunset scene, we're going to be using our pencil, and you may also want to have your eraser and your pencil sharpener nearby. We're going to begin by creating the ground. So you can have a nice straight ground, or you may prefer having a few little hills. So simply draw a line from one side of the page to the other side towards the bottom so that you have a lot of room to make your sunset. Now, the African savanna is a grassland, and there are a few trees on the savanna as well. The most common type of tree is called a baobab tree or an acacia tree. These trees are very sprawled out and most of the leaves are at the top. So I'm going to draw one so you can see what it looks like, but I'm sure that you've seen them on TV before. Where should I draw my baobab tree? I think right here on the hill looks like a nice place. Now the branches of the baobab tree are quite wide, so I'm going to make several reaching up to the top. You want to make sure that you draw the lines dark enough so that once we've painted over this sky area, you'll still be able to see the lines afterwards. So now that I've drawn the trunk and the branches, I'm going to add a few leaves at the top. So the leaves, we don't have to draw each single leaf. We can just kind of make little bunches of leaves like this. They kind of look like clouds a little bit. There we go. My baobab tree is finished. Now the other thing that we can find in the African savanna are animals. So the animals that live in the savanna are many. There are rhinoceros, lions, gazelles, zebras, giraffes, elephants. This one's pretty tiny. He must be a baby. Cheetahs and other wild cats. For this next step, you're going to want to choose a few animals to draw. You could choose 1, 2, 3. 3's probably a good number because we don't want them to be too crowded in the page. So I would pick between 1 and 3. If you want to draw the same animal, maybe a family of the same animals, that's fine. Or you can do different animals. You can always just choose to draw one animal, and that's fine as well. So I wonder which animal I should choose. I do like giraffes. Maybe I'll draw a giraffe. And maybe an elephant. Now, if you happen to have little plastic animals like this at home, you might want to get them out so that you can use them as an inspiration. If you don't have any animals like this at home, maybe you have some picture books you can look at to get some ideas, or you can go online and do a search for African animals. Now that I've chosen which animals I'm going to be including in my Sunset on the Savannah artwork, I'm going to start drawing them. So we're not going to be drawing all the details, so I won't be drawing any of the spots on the giraffe or any of the parts of the face, only the contour. So we're just going to draw the silhouette of each animal, okay? So I'm going to be drawing for my artwork, I'm going to draw a little elephant over here and a larger giraffe over here that's going to be reaching up to the leaves up here on the tree. When you draw your animals, make sure you start them on this line because eventually this ground is going to be colored in entirely in black, as well as the tree and the animals themselves are going to be colored in black or a dark color like brown. The rest of the sky is where the sunset magic is going to happen. So I'm going to begin with the elephant, and I'm going to be drawing him right here close to the tree. So if you have a little plastic animal that you want to use as a guide, you can keep that close where you can see it. Or if you have some picture books that you want to open up to a certain page, or maybe you have animals on a computer screen that you've done a search for, you can keep them close by as well. If you're not able to find any images, just try to use your imagination and draw your animal as best as you can. Now I'm going to move on to the giraffe. Now that we've finished drawing the ground, the baobab tree, and the animal silhouettes, it's now time to do some painting. We're going to be painting a beautiful sunset in the background here where the sky is. So at this point, you can get out your watercolors if you have some. And if you have watercolors, then you're also going to need your container with water and some kind of a tray or a lid to dilute your paint in. You may also want to have some paper towel on hand. Now, if you're not using watercolor paints and you've made your own paints using tea or coffee, this is the time to get them out. If you're going to be using your own paints that you've made at home with tea or coffee, the paint is already diluted enough. You won't have to add any water to it. The only paints you'll have to use water with are the watercolor paints. So now we can get out a brush, paintbrush, or if you have a little piece of sponge, this also works really well for this step of the project. I'm going to show you how we can use both of them so that you can see how it's done. So for my sunset, I've chosen some warmer colors. I'm going to be using some reds and some oranges and some yellows. You can add some purples, whatever colors you like that you think would look nice in a sunset. But these are the colors that I'm going to be using. So at this point, I'll show you how it works with a sponge. I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to dip it in this water and squeeze it out a bit, but I want to make sure that there's a good amount of water on here. Then I'm going to take the sponge over to, I think I'll start with the red. And I'm going to put the sponge in the little palette of red paint and rub it around so that I get lots of red paint on my sponge. Okay, now I'm going to dip this in the water again just to dilute it a little bit so that it's not full strength. And then I'm going to put a little bit on this mixing tray. Okay, as you can see, the paint has lightened a little bit with a bit of extra water on it. So now I think I'm going to start at the top of the sky with a strip of red. So you don't have to worry about going inside the tree. We're just going to cover this entire area with sunset colors. You don't have to worry about trying to stay out of this area where you've drawn. So I'll start in the corner and I'm going to draw my paint all the way to the other side. Okay? So as you can see, it's not a full, vibrant, deep red. It's kind of a lighter red, and that's sort of what a sunset looks like. If you feel that that color is a little bit too light, you can always go over it one more time by dipping your sponge back in the paint that's on your palette and adding a second coat to it, like this. As you can see, that color is now much darker. We're going to move on to our next color. So I think I'm going to go on now to a dark orange, and I'll show you how that's done with a paintbrush instead of the sponge. So you'll take your paintbrush and you can dip it in the water. Make sure it gets nice and wet. Pick your color. I'm going to be choosing this orange here. And I'm going to make sure that I get a good amount of orange pigment from this little paint. Now this color will be fairly strong. So what I'm going to do once it's on the paintbrush is I'm going to try and take some of it off here on this lid. And I'm going to dip my paintbrush back in the water and add some water to it just to dilute the color a little bit and make it a little bit lighter. You can mix it up nicely. And I think we're ready to do our next layer of the sunset. So starting again at the edge of the page, we're going to draw our paintbrush from one side to the other. Now I want my orange to be a little bit more intense, so I'm going to do that one more time, and I'm also going to bring the orange a little bit further down. So I'll go over what I've just done a second time. And then I'll do a second layer of orange just underneath. And I'll go over it one more time with a little bit more orange paint. Here we go, we're ready for our next color. So that's how you would do it with a paintbrush. I'm going to continue with the paintbrush, and I think I'll move on to a lighter orange. I think I'll use this one now. So once again, I'll rub my paintbrush around in the paint palette and make sure that I get lots of that color pigment on the brush. Great. Now, if you still have paint on your lid, you can always use another cleaner lid to do your next color. And add some water again, mixing it up nicely. That looks great. Okay, I'm ready to do my next layer of sunset. It's coming along nicely. Ooh, that's a nice color. Looks like a tangerine or something. I'm going to bring it down a little bit further. So I'll add a second layer just below it. That's starting to look really nice, I think. Okay, we've been using our watercolor paints so far for this sunset, but now I just want to show you what you would be doing if you were using your own homemade paints that you had made with tea and coffee. Remember always to ask an adult for help if you are making your own paints. So this particular paint is steeped orange pekoe tea, and it's cooled down so it's safe to use now. You're not going to need a jug of water because this paint is already diluted enough, which means it's light enough already to add directly to the page. So you could do this with a paintbrush or a sponge. It's up to you. I'm going to switch back to this sponge just to show you how that's done again. So I'll dip my sponge in this tea. I'm going to squeeze it out because we don't want our page to be too wet because then it will take too long to dry. And I'm going to do like we've been doing, dragging the sponge across the page. You'll notice that these colors are much lighter, so you may have to do several layers. I think I'd like mine just a little bit darker, so I'm going to add a few more coats of this paint without making it too wet. So make sure you squeeze it out well enough so that there's not too much wetness or dampness. Okay, that's looking really nice. So now we're going to let all of our sunset dry, and then we'll be ready to add the black part of our artwork with our colored markers. Now that we've finished painting our beautiful sunset, you want to make sure that you take a break and let it dry thoroughly. Once it's thoroughly dry, you can move on to the next step, and we'll be needing a dark colored marker, such as black, but I also mentioned that brown or even a dark purple will work nicely. The first thing to do will be to trace over all of the little pencil lines that you made earlier with your black or your dark marker. Once that's finished, we're going to color all of those areas in. So when this is finished, the tree, the animals, and the ground will all be black, and this will create a really amazing sunset effect. Are you ready? Let's get started. We are almost finished. Now that we've colored in all of the sections in black with our black marker or a dark marker, all we need to do is add a nice frame. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. So for this step, you'll need a glue stick and a sheet of colored construction paper. Now I've decided that I like mine with a black border. So that's what I'm going to use, but you can use whatever color you like. So we're going to flip over our artwork, apply some glue, and then we'll flip it over, center it nicely, press it down, and then we will have a nice frame for our African sunset on the savanna. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun. Okay, that should do it. I'm going to flip my artwork over, center it nicely on my construction paper, press it down nicely, and there you have it. It's ready to be hung on the wall. Thank you for joining me today for another Crafternoon art activity. I hope you enjoyed learning how to create your very own sunset on the savanna and that you're happy with the results. It's already time to say goodbye, but I'll be back again next week with another artistic adventure. If you liked what we did today, don't forget to like this video, and I also invite you to subscribe to our Ottawa Public Library YouTube channel. That way you'll be notified whenever we have new content that's been uploaded. Right now, we also have an online summer camp happening. It's called Summerland, and there's an amazing schedule of wonderful presenters, activities, and programs happening. All you have to do is go to biblioottawalibrary.ca. That's the library's website, and find the link for Summerland. That way you'll have access to all these amazing programs. I'll see you again soon for another Crafternoon. Bye now.